Hey guys, what's up? It's Ryan from Dirt Bike Project channel. Today I am doing something that I have not done before. I'm actually putting this back together. I'm rebuilding the rear shock on my XR600. Now I took this apart before I created the channel, so this, or I don't have the video to show you how to take this apart, but I'm gonna try to put it back together today, and we'll show you how we're going to do that. We're going to need a couple of tools. The most notable is, as many of you know, there is a nitrogen component. You need to be able to put nitrogen back into this. This is the bladder that goes in there. I'm going to use air. I have not found any reason not to use air. And it's easy to swap back out for nitrogen if I need to do that. So I'm going to use air, and to do that I have a high pressure pump here that can go up to the high enough pressures. You probably aren't going to be able to use your air compressor because most air compressors do not go to a high enough pressure. I need to double check the pressure on mine, but it's north of 200 psi. So most of the air compressors aren't going to be able to do that. So I have a high pressure pump here just to do that. Most of the rest of this stuff is basic tools, some picks for the snap rings, maybe some snap ring pliers, although on this particular model there's no snap ring holes to put it in there, so screwdrivers and picks, maybe some needle nose pliers. Obviously everything needs to be clean, so some contact cleaner, and obviously new suspension fluid, and I've got several new parts here. This is the shock seal kit. I've got a new bladder and a new bump stop. So those are the new things that I'm going to be putting in there, and so let's get started. So I've got a couple of pieces of wood here as my soft jaws, so you don't mar up any of the pieces you're working on. And this is the shock shaft right here that I've got in the vise. So we want to put a few pieces on here first. So I've got my new bump stop. It's going to go on. And then this is the back of the shaft seal that goes on next. So when this goes together, the piston and everything goes in here, and this is going to plug the bottom there. Next, I've got my brand new seal head kit that I got here. So the bushing and the seal, the dust seal, O-ring, and everything is all brand new in here. This is the easiest way to replace that. This is what was bad on mine. This went out, and the shock was just not working. So I'm not making any valving changes or anything like that. Just rebuilding it, putting new oil in, new seals. So to get this on here, what you don't want to do is mess up these seals. And there's a lip here where the piston and the shim stack sits, and you don't want to get that caught on here. So you want to use a little bit of grease on here. They do sell like what they call a bullet tool that goes on the top of here that makes this smooth, and it kind of has a rounded point at the end so that you don't mess up your seals. I don't have one of those, but you can still make this happen without doing that. It's just be very careful and make sure you get some grease on here and be real careful getting it on. So I've got a little bit of grease here. I'm going to grease this up and get it on there. You don't need very much. You don't want to get it everywhere, but enough to keep the seals from sliding, or keep them sliding so that they don't catch. I've got the seal on there now, so I can slide that down, and then I'm just gonna wipe this up a little bit. You don't want too much in there. You don't want grease plugging up your ports, so the shock oil's got to flow well. So now that we've got that on there, we can wipe off any excess. You just gotta want to make sure that you don't get a ton in there, just a little bit, so that the seal slides over there. Okay, now we're ready to put the valving part of this back together. So I've got my valving stacks here all ready to go, cleaned up. So it's just a matter of getting them slid on. These are directional. Make sure you put them on the right direction for your motorcycle. Mine are a little bit off center here. You don't want to bend these either, so you don't want to force these on. Might be easier to do these a couple at a time. Just make sure you don't change the order. You mess with your valving. Alright. The piston goes on. And then the rebound stack goes on the top. All right, that looks nice. So we got everything on there. So I've got all my shims and everything on here. This is all in correct sizes and heights. You know, I didn't make any changes, so I didn't expect to. Get a little bit of a Loctite on here. Not too much. You don't want any of this stuff in the valve stack. And we're going to tighten this on. And then there's a torque value for every manufacturer. Make sure you do the right one for your bike. Mine was 25 foot-pounds, so make sure you do that right with the torque wrench and make sure this is tight. Okay, now we're on to the next steps. So we've got this all figured out and put together at this point. We're going to put this aside a second. Now we're going to put the shock body into the vise. Again, make sure you're using soft jaws. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is put in the new bladder assembly. So I've got a new one here. And here is my end here, the part where you fill it up with nitrogen. Okay, I've got the bladder installed on the end cap here. You want to make sure that it's not, you don't want to squeeze it down. Make sure that the pressure is equalized in here. And then what we're going to do, we're going to get some suspension fluid. Make sure you use the right stuff for your bike, obviously. My assistant's down here helping me out, my 2-year-old. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to pour oil into where the bladder goes first. You want to make sure all the, I can kind of hear the air bubbles coming through. You want to, I'm looking in the other side here, and I see oil draining in. That's a good thing. I've got the compression adjuster all the way out to as soft as it'll go to kind of maximize that flow. You want to pour a little bit in this side too, because you do not want any air in there. You want to make sure the oil is higher than the little orifice that allows the oil to pass between these two things. In this one, there's actually a little mark in here. I'm going to guess that's pretty close to what I need, but we'll see. We'll be able to tell really easily in just a minute here. Okay, so I'm going to test this in here. So what we want to make sure happens is that this oil overflows. You do not want any air bubbles in here. It will not work right. So I'm going to stick this in here. Actually, I probably have more than maybe I needed. There's the top, and so we want to gently push this in and make sure, again, we don't want any air bubbles, so we're going to make this overflow. This is probably more overflowing than I really want. press this in. Get some more paper towels here. Try to keep from making a huge mess. There we go. That went in there. I felt that come in. And you go down far enough that you can get the little circlip in. And as I push this in, the oil goes into the, on the other side. But there shouldn't be any air in there because we made it overflow. A little bit further. Okay, that should be enough. Wipe this off. All right, so the next step is to put in this clip. So you can use a screwdriver or pliers or whatever and just push it in. I've got a file here. I can just snap this in. Proving to be a little more pain than I thought. There we go. Make sure that's in good. It's in the little recess that's in there. Wipe my hands off here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we want to make sure that this thing is up against that ring. And to do that, we're going to put a little bit of air in here. From what I've read, about 40 pounds is good. So as I pump this up, I can see this thing going up against the clip. All right, so there we are, just over 40 pounds there. I don't know if you can see that number, but I'm going to unscrew this. Seeing that so much air leaked out when I did that makes me a little bit nervous about when I actually charge this, if I can get the right pressure in there, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So this should be nice and solid up against that ring. It looks right to me. So we're good to go. Now it's kind of the same thing on this other side. Similar. Remember, I have some air pressure in here, and that's important because we're going to have to bleed this out and do everything. So I'm going to take some more suspension fluid. Fill it up about halfway as to start with, and we'll adjust as needed. But everything's there. Torque that. Let that dry for a little while, and we'll lock tight on this nut. You can see that. And then, so next step is to put this in. So I'm going to work this in, and then it looks like I'm going to need a little more fluid. And then you want to work this slowly so that you don't make a mess, but you want to get all the air bubbles out of this. Can't have any air in here or it will not work. So when you pull this back up through, you don't want to suck air back in through the valves and all that. So I'm going to fill this up some more. So right now I have the oil level, you can't see it, but the oil level is probably 3/8, maybe half an inch from the actual lip. So it's about, the level's about here right now. And that's so that I can bleed the air out of this valve stack. So you never want to, once you get this immersed, the valve stack in here, you never want to take it out of the oil. Looks like I've got it bled pretty good. Anyway, I've got this valve stack bled pretty good now. I've gone through several times and made sure there's no air bubbles. You know, I can push it down in here and I don't hear anything moving around in there, so I think we're good. Oil level at this point, right about here. So what we want to do is same thing as before, is we want to make sure that this overflows, and when we get down here to this seal, when this seal hits here, all of a sudden the oil will be incompressible. So you definitely want to make sure you got about 40 or so psi in here so that this bladder expands, and then when you push it in, what we're going to do is as we push and overflow, we're going to let that air out so that this bladder will come back down and shrink back down so you have about the right amount of oil in the shock. So we're going to do that right now. We'll make sure this is full. So this is basically right up here at the top. I know I'm going to overflow some. I'm going to put some of my rags here from before underneath here. Try to catch as much of this as I can so I don't have such a big mess. Okay, so I got overflow right here. That's what we want to see. All right, so as soon as that seal hit there, I can tell it's sealed because I can't compress this anymore. That is for certain. So what I'm going to do, just pick a little screwdriver, or I got a file here, whatever, just something that you can push on that valve stem, and we are going to push this in. So as you push force, then you let the air out. Just enough to let that go in. Alright, so now I'm going to go get a special tool. I believe they call this a seal head setting tool. It's just a way to put force on this. Anyway, this little tool just makes it easier so I can push on this. So I'm going to push on it a little bit more. And I just need to push on it enough so that I can get the snap rings in. It looks like I'm there. Tool out, there we go. And this particular new head unit came with a new snap ring, so I'm just going to use the new one. This can be a bit of a bear to get in. It's a pretty tight one. It's critical to make sure this is in all the way around, all the way to the tips, so that this doesn't come out, and this looks pretty good. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is put a little bit more air in this again. Now this should all be good to go now. I'm going to have my hand on it just in case, but I felt that come right up and seat against that snap ring I just put in there by putting that little bit of pressure in there. I'm just going to wipe this out to make sure I don't have a lot of extra oil and things in here. Okay, this little hole needs to be in the back, and this is kind of a hammer-on sort of a deal. So make sure the holes are oriented front to back. So on my bike, this is on the side, so I'm going to orient it this way to be approximately front to back. And then don't do this with a metal hammer. Get a block of wood or something and pound this on. Okay, I grabbed a little block of wood and I'm just gonna hammer this in. I might even be able to just use the block of wood, but want to make sure it goes in. Make sure it goes in relatively straight. There we go. So anyway, at this point, I'm going to put the spring on and everything and put it back on the bike. So that's how you put the dampers back together. And it's been fun. This is the first time I've done this. I learned a lot in this process, and I hope you did too. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.